It is the 17th of the 8th, 2025. The time is 7 minutes past 8, and that can only mean one thing. There are very many F1 centric threads, as always, at which we need to pull. We'll talk about Danny Rick's incident over the next 10 to 15 minutes. Curtailed settings, because the F1 news cycle does one of these. We'll talk about Singapore bribery. So too, we'll talk about George Russell defaming the one that they call Sir Lewis Carl Davidson Hamilton. Liam Lawson saying that he was lied to by Red Bull at the altar of experimental setups in Bahrain. So too, we'll talk about Alonso and his relationship with F1 fans. And in the final stanza, we'll talk about Eccleston on Lewis and Ferrari. Oscar Piastri gives an interview to Autosport, and Dr. Helmut Marko characterises the relationship and the quantum as far as quality between the two McLaren drivers, aka Lando Norris and OJP. It's going to get techie, I'm telling you. Easy G, F1 boy James, your absolute legend, Space Ghost in the house. Go on, let me tell you about this in the first instance. We've got to talk about some Christian Horner, because over the last 48 hours, something has happened critical. You will recall that Christian Horner, when he was giving his leaving speech, was talking about, I'm stepping away from operational duties, in brackets, unsaid, I will still be a Red Bull employee. No longer, however, and this is why we know, because again, when you're changing the organisational structure as far as directors, you've got to log that with Companies House. Please see Exhibit A. This is Red Bull Technology, aka Red Bull Racing, Oracle Red Bull Racing, letting it be known that Christian Horner, as at the 12th of the 8th, 2025, is no longer an Oracle Red Bull Racing director. He was before. Of course, the paradigm, the paradox even as far as Christian Horner is that he always wanted to be an equity guy, a shareholder, a team principal, come majority shareholder, just like Toto the boy who cried wolf say. The reason why they could sack him is because he wasn't that. Now, however, all of this operational stuff that Christian Horner was talking in his leaving speech is gonzo. He's on holiday now unshackled from the employee-employer contract that so epitomised his relationship with Oracle Red Bull Racing since 2005. There it is, ladies and gentlemen. Feels like a paradigm shift, I'm not going to lie. How is Christian Horner no longer associated with Oracle Red Bull Racing? And you mean to tell me that in all likelihood, the one that they call Checo Perez will be on the grid next year and Christian Horner will not owe the humanity? In the second instance, let me talk about Danny Rick. I just want these guys to look after themselves, you know. I'll be honest with you. I don't want to hear any reports over the course of the summer break of Andrea Kimi Antonelli needing to be rescued because his jet ski ran out of fuel. And I definitely don't want to hear any reports about Danny Rick having an accident on a dirt bike in Queensland. Is he okay? You bet your bottom dollar he is. But these guys need to look after them bloody self. Danny Rick, I know you're no longer a Formula One driver and therefore you are looking for ways, for thrills, for adrenaline pumps and dumps. Come on though, chap. Danny Rick, look after yourself, fella. It wasn't too long ago that football lost itself, one of its chosen ones in Diogo Jota, and I don't like reading these headlines. Oh, and by the way, Singapore bribery settings. The BBC put forth an article where it talks about a Singapore billionaire being fined $23,400 US. Why? Well, because he admitted bribery. He was flirting his eyes at a political official, aiding and abetting the obstruction of justice by helping ex-Transport Minister Iswaran cover up evidence while the latter was being investigated for corruption, bribery, aiding and abetting settings. Ong, says the article on BBC, gave expensive gifts, including an all-expenses paid trip with a private jet ride to Iswaran while they were engaged in official business. Now, this is techie chat. The only reason why I bring this forth to the F1 panel, judge and jury, is because if rumour is to be believed as far as F1, there is a set of elections coming up to decide the FIA president, the next one in December. Why then all of a sudden at these races in 2025 are you seeing international delegates from federations around the world making use of VIP tickets at the altar of the FIA president? Allegedly. Why? Well, because F1 is a piranha's tank, right? And to remove monetary gain and financial resource from the F1 equation would be to remove F1 from itself. You cannot separate the two. Indeed, they're entities that exist in the same space. They are not mutually exclusive. You cannot have another F1 race without monetary gain. Oh, and by the way, to that point, Fernando Alonso says the following. I don't think me and Nico care about this F1 movie, the next generation, Generation Z, TikTok and F1 memes. I'm not interested in that. Fernando Alonso says, all I care about is trying to win races, trying to work with the team to make sure that we optimize for performance. The fans, he says, quote, and the people outside watching TV don't have the full picture of what is going on and the difference in performance between the cars. Interesting that from Fernando. He was talking about maybe Nico Hulkenberg got his podium because of the F1 movie. What is that, Gubbins? Stop doing F1 apophenia, F1 media. This is nonsense. And I concur with Fernando Alonso in this sense. He continues, quote, when we achieve the result, we just try to share it with the fans and with the team, the workers, the employees and the fans all around the world. He continues, but they are not our priority. Oh, the humanity, Fernando. How very dare you, sir? Remember that the multi-million pounds as far as your remuneration package is by dint of the Sky subscriptions, the F1 TV Pro, the merchandise that fans buy all around the world. Fernando Alonso, wind your net back in there for, sir. He continues, it cannot stand rude. It cannot sound rude to anyone. We love the fans, but we don't think about if they realise how good or bad we drive. That is more for the team. Fernando Alonso pointing his lenses at the fans all around the world who fund without whom his career could not exist. Oh, and by the way, Liam Lawson saying that Red Bull lied, that he needed time. Remember the quote, I need time. That's the one thing that I'm not going to get. Here's what Liam Lawson has said about his stint at the big team Oracle Red Bull Racing. If you look, quote, how other teams have approached bringing a younger driver in and look at the test days, the time in the seat, the amount of testing that, for example, Kimi Antonelli has done in the past before racing in Formula One this year, for me, did not do any of that. It was 2 weekends on 2 tracks I'd never raced before. One of them being a sprint race weekend. They weren't smooth weekends. We didn't do our due diligence. We had issues in Bahrain testing with reliability. We had issues in Melbourne too with reliability. In China, we took a shot in the dark with a setup to try and learn something. For me, I was under the understanding, says Liam Lawson, that it was to help me develop for the future and to have an understanding of the car. Oh, the humanity. Now all of a sudden there's no Christian Horner. Everybody's free to talk now, right? Unmuzzled, pointing blame at the way in which they were indeed the culture of Oracle Red Bull Racing. Oh, and by the way, speaking of working culture, King George Russell of Kingsley, Norfolk has had some things to say as always. He says, quote, we obviously started really well talking to the inconsistency of the boys and girls from Brackley and Brixworth. Now we've had a run of bad form. I hope we can get back on track, but there's always pros and cons to every change that you make in any organisation. Speaking to the random walk that so characterise McLaren's or Mercedes even, their journey to try and improve the car, it feels like they've been throwing the dartboard at the darts for the longest time over the past 36 months, say, but after the time when Mercedes decided that they were going to focus on a 2022 car, not the bird in the hand that was the 2021 Drivers' Championship. George Russell continues, but I think the change was with Lewis. It's good for him. It's really good for us as a team, a fresh start. Sometimes you need a break. You need to break that mold to find yourself back on track. Oh, the humanity, King George Russell. About whom are you speaking, sir? Can you spell patronising? Can you spell condescending? New start. It's not for you to say, King George Russell. I don't think, particularly if we're having conversations about performance. Sir, you have how many championships, King George? Yeah, of course you'll be a champion at some point in the not too distant future. But for now, sir, I think you need to take 2 seats on this. Oh, and by the way, Speaking of Sir Lewis Hamilton, Bernie Ecclestone, as he always likes to do, has chimed in on the automotive Rubik's Cube. That is Sir Lewis Hamilton's performance this year. 14 races down, 0 podiums. Sir Lewis, Carl Davids and Hamilton's longest streak sans podium. Here's what Bernie has to say. At the moment, I cannot say anything negative about the Italian staff working for Ferrari, but I think the team needs somebody to take charge, find the right direction and get the job done. I'm not sure that taking Lewis Hamilton was the right decision. Lewis is obviously very talented, but a little bit political, which is typical for Ferrari and typical for Lewis. But he could come to life again, which would be good for him and good for Ferrari and good for the sport. Bernie Ecclestone, I would contend. I mean, a rising Lewis Hamilton tide floats all F1 boats, does it not, Bernie? That's not to say that the performance has been up to par season to date, but is that to say that that will continue, that line of travel, the trajectory will continue as is over the next 12 to 24 months? Who the fudge knows? If I were a betting man, however, never bet against Max nor Sir Lewis Hamilton. Oh, and by the way, Oscar Piastri's given an interview to Autosport. I wanted to go through it because this is techie than techie things. With Jake Boxall-Legg, he said the following. He's addressed the consistency, the circumstance between him and Lando, the papaya rules, etc. We'll go through them one by one because there were some important points as far as the complexion of the championship. In the first instance, you remember, at the press conference at the last race, he was asked, listen, is it speed or is it consistency? Then Oscar Piastri said, you're going to need both if you're going to win a championship in 2025. You can't sacrifice one at the altar of the other. He reiterates that with Autosport in their interview. He says, I need to be consistent, but I need to be consistently quick to win a championship. Therefore, it's too early to start playing for time. I'm in the lead in the championship, but I'm not going to look in my wing mirrors. That's not the point. What I want to do is come away from every single weekend feeling like I've optimized for my performance and the not insubstantial opportunity that's before me. He was asked about the Prost comparisons. Lest we forget, at Goodwood this year, Prost was asked about the similarities, the comparisons between his driving style and the way in which he approached his racing in a Formula One car and Oscar Piastri. Then he said that I like Oscar. He's very good at making decisions. He takes the right opportunities, not every opportunity. Again, that feels like a subtle dig at Ayrton Senna, right? If you no longer go for a gap, you are no longer a racing driver. Well, not quite, because context is key. When asked about that, Oscar says, yeah, I don't hate those comparisons. Because again, not all opportunities are created equally. And to that point, this is what's important, chat. I think Lando has had his time. Again, if we're overlaying opinions and conjecture and speculation, I know that Oscar Piastri is the betting favourite for the championship. And I think that's right, chat. As far as Lando Norris's ability to navigate and manage the car around low minimum speed turn, which is his strength. You'll recall that Austria, so too Hungary, meant to be Lando Norris specialities. However, over the next 10 races, you've got the Dutch Grand Prix coming up, you've got Monza, you've got Baku, you've got Singapore. None of those tracks are low minimum speed type turns. They will not suit Lando Norris, therefore. Same things to be said about COTA, Mexican Grand Prix 2, Brazil at Interlagos and Las Vegas. Are you having a giraffe? These are Oscar Piastri tracks. He went well around those last year. So you can extrapolate that to him going not too badly around them this year. Here's what else you need to know. Oscar Piastri, if past this prologue, once he gets his nose in front in F2 or F3, is very hard to depose. Max Verstappen-esque in terms of the way that he defends and gets his elbows out, not on track necessarily, or not just on track necessarily, but in the Drivers' Championship. How, therefore, do you beat Oscar Piastri? Just like you beat Maximilian Verstappen, by getting your nose in front early and keeping it there. Oh, and by the way, to that point, Helmut Marko has been talking about Oscar as versus Lando Norris, and here's what he has to say. He says that Piastri has the nerve. He's more consistent, less emotional than Lando Norris. He always gets the best out of himself. I've never seen Oscar so emotionally charged as compared to Lando Norris, that Lando might be the faster over the course of one lap, but overall I see Oscar Piastri ahead. There's Helmut Marko's words, not mine. He continues, comparing Max to Oscar. That Oscar could be the next one, the next Max Verstappen, the next champion elect. But he continues and he says, but Verstappen is Verstappen. There is a difference. Oscar still has a long way to go if the benchmark is Max. The potential to become a truly great driver is there though, but he needs to deliver upon that not insubstantial promise this year. Chat is going to get techier than techie things. Back to the usual scheduling tomorrow. I promise. 10 a.m, 8 p.m. We ride again at dawn. Between now and next time, the prosecution rests. No further questions, Your Honour.